Hi, this is Mike, and we're looking at the Aussie dollar chart. In this particular view, I'm going to reintroduce the idea of the higher move up in Aussie, right? Now, if you think about it, for the US dollar to pull back as much as it might do in a correction, there's just a couple of things I want to consider here, and that is how five wave moves can begin. So, before I get to that part, I want to talk about this particular view for a wave two correction, right? Now, as you can see here, I've basically brought back the idea of a wave A, but this time we have a small wave B and C and D, and then we have an E, right? Now, the reason I'm bringing this idea back is because of the extremely corrective looking choppy nature of this entire move down. Um, to be honest with you, the B wave here, the C and the D, they kind of make me think that this idea has some merit behind it. So my job here is to give you ideas. This is my idea that I'm bringing. So the way I like to see this pattern, I've seen it before, very similar in oil. You had a small sort of D, and then you had a massive E down. This sort of pattern can happen. I have seen it. Basically, it's interesting how you have these two zigzag moving up here. Um, to me, that's some kind of indication there that I don't want to overlook, if, especially when it's too late. So if this is the true corrective pattern that I'm seeing here, then we need to basically break above this level here, 71 cents, to confirm that we're moving higher in wave three. Right now, the next count I'm going to show you is a count from the lows, which is basically indicating that the move up was a weak five wave move. Now, the weird thing about this weak five wave move is that waves 4 and 1 and 2 aren't overlapping, right? So the explanation behind it is we have a zigzag up, a corrective 2, like basically like a short and sharp 2, a wave 3 zigzag up, an alternation wave 4, which is more drawn out sideways, and then this entire move up since basically the 20th of December was simply just another zigzag pattern, right? And then after that, what we've seen, in my opinion, is an ABC pattern. Now, the problem with assuming that this C pattern is complete is probably a mistake because of basically next to no correction at all and way too shallow. Now, if you know anything about this kind of pattern, is that it is weak and you get deep pullbacks, okay? You get deep pullbacks to the point where it looks like it's going to go lower and lower and lower, not stop. So it's interesting how this idea came about, and it's because at the highs here, we started to see a lot of chop, and it wasn't really consistent with like a 1-2, 1-2, like I previously had suggested at one point. To me, I think it just took a long time for us to see this pattern and then the resulting moves afterwards, especially with what happened right before the CPI numbers in the US. This pattern became particularly strange looking. and to me is consistent with a B wave zigzag, right? So it's an irregular top as known by Ellioticians. And I'll just remind you again, this is not Elliott wave, it's Arias wave, it's a different methodology. And an irregular top is when you get the price actions expanding above the end of the actual 5 wave move. And I believe that since that time, that's all we have seen. Right now, for me to assume that this is not going to go lower now, I think it's a mistake given that we've seen basically no correction and no real pullback. Like if you take a fib to the end of the presumed wave 5, we've had basically no pullback at all, zero. So if this idea is at all going to be accurate in any way, shape, or form, we need to see some kind of pullback back down to 50%, 0.618, somewhere like that. I'm not sure, right? And eventually we'll need to see a break above the start of wave E for the previous wave 2 correction, right? Now, this idea definitely wasn't an easy choice to come up with. I had to basically not look at the chart for a while. Now, I could be wrong. I've had many interpretations of this chart, but to me, it's kind of strange how this thing can be looked at as a 5 wave move. Definitely not anything strong, impulsive. Obviously, that's why it's a weak 5 wave move. But the problem with assuming that because it's weak, it doesn't have potential, I suppose, is one of those things where if it was to be the start of a wave 3, a lot of people probably wouldn't notice it until it was too late. So that's why I have to sort of bring this idea to you now at a time where it's still very early for this type of move. So yeah, going back to that whole idea that Aussie dollar could go much higher is also kind of in line with my Euro Aussie dollar chart idea that I have produced recently, right? Where I'll just go to the daily, right? Where it's expected that the euro will weaken against the Aussie dollar, right? I believe that we're in a wave E of this chart, and we're in wave, I think we could be in wave 3 now, depending on the smaller pattern. But I have made a video about this. I'll link it down below. And if we are to see this type of thing happen here sometime soon, it might explain why I see potentially that could be happening in the Aussie dollar, and the euro could be correcting as mentioned before. But there's a but. There's also a chance that the larger wave D idea that I had previously in the US dollar might be this particular count that I have for the Aussie dollar might be applicable to that chart. Okay, it might be applicable. So I'm going to be looking at that next, but I think it's still wise to consider that potentially we need to still see a pullback here, right? And that kind of pullback could be indicative of potentially a retest of something, right? Um, like how can I say it? If we saw okay, let me just put the labels back on. If we saw A, B, C, D, E, right, what would be the best way to draw this particular trend line? In my opinion, it would be that probably wouldn't be a good idea, but this B and D potentially, or it could be A and C, or it could also be the midpoint of a channel, right? So something like that, midpoint of a channel, could be some confluence down the track here, depending on how this particular move goes. There could be some area of confluence relating to this type of channeling technique, um, somewhere around March potentially, um, as a point of reference there, using the channeling and the fib at the same time. That is hearsay at the moment. That's just guessing games at this point. It's nothing to even think about at this point. For me right now, if this is the type of count that I'm seeing, because to be honest with you, this price action here, it this looks like it's just a B wave, right? This whole mess of a move here is, to me, I call that just a zigzag, right? And I can highlight where I think the A wave ended, it'd be here, and then the B wave ended here, and then the C wave there. Okay, so that's how I see that. I don't see anything else. That's why I haven't posted for a while, because I think if you look at this in any other way, I think you're bucking up the wrong tree. So I'll update the euro idea based on a bit more analysis, and I'll catch you on the next one.